All right. Well, last but not least, Mark and Nancy, all the way from Porto Alegre, Brazil.
Yes.
So they're on the verge of moving back to Rehoboth, but went down there to they're going to tell us all about the program that they've been running down there, but ended up staying down there for 8 years. So, but heading home soon. So I'll turn things over to you and let you describe it, and we can just have an informal talk. But I'm interested in obviously learning what you've been doing and how it applies elsewhere around the globe.
Sure. Okay. Well, first off, we since we're not showing slides or anything like that, the Global Urban Development, GUD, we have 2 websites. So I wanted to start off by, if something interests you, encourage you. The first one is globalurban.org. And that was from the beginning in 2001. That covers like everything. And there are tons of downloadable free documents there. And but that one, believe it or not, when we built it all the way back to the beginning, we used this Microsoft software called FrontPage. And at the end of 2019, they eliminated FrontPage. So we couldn't keep the site going. So it's a huge archive of everything we did up to the end of 2019. And then we have a new one, globalurban.net. And the thing that's really good about that is that one is devoted almost all to the sustainable innovation zones movement that we've been doing. So there's, videos and photos and articles in English on ZISPOA, which is the Porto Alegre Sustainable Innovation Zone, as well as some videos and other information about the other spin-offs. So we have in Santo Angelo, Brazil, it's called ZISAN. And in Panama City, Panama, it's called ACTA. And we were also on our way to organizing zones in London, in Camden, and in Brooklyn, around Brooklyn with Brooklyn College, and in Western Sydney, Australia. But all that got put on hold by COVID, but hopefully it'll get revived again. So that's the starting point. Please visit those. And the next thing I guess to say is that Global Development GUD is a kind of
it's a Delaware.
Yeah, it's incorporated in the state of Delaware as a nonprofit organization that is a Save the World organization that as we actually launched. It grew out of a project I was doing at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars, which is part of the Smithsonian Institution in Washington. It was called Global Outlook. And then on 9/11, literally on that day, a few hours after the attack, we decided to create a global urban development. So it'll be 20 years this September. And the idea was, as we like to say, it's to help enable all people everywhere in the world to live and to thrive in peace with each other and in peace with nature. So that was our aim, to try and to help turn the world in a better direction. And it started as a think tank originally in Washington, London. And then because we wanted to show that we were global and neutral, we put the main office in Prague, in the Czech Republic, where Nancy and I got to live from 2002 through 2005. And then and also in Barcelona. So in the beginning, we were focused a lot on Europe, and then it grew from there, also working with the UN and World Bank on developing countries, where we focused on 4 countries, mostly all along, on China, Brazil, India, and South Africa. I guess the other thing to kind of throw into the mix, you understand the context, is that, going all the way back to the 1970s, I've been a economic development person, as a professor, as a policymaker, as a consultant, practitioner, you name it, on urban and regional economic development and state and local economic development in the US. And why that's important is because in the 1970s in California, I was one of the first people to get involved in what we called sustainable economic development. We didn't have that term then because that didn't come till the 80s with the Brundtland Commission. So we would call it economic development that was based on environmental quality and alternative energy and appropriate technology. But and in especially in Berkeley, California, in 1981, 4 decades ago, we did, I think, the first sustainable economic development strategy in America for Berkeley to grow. And there were 2 things about it. One, it was super sustainable and it was super equitable. So if you look at the funny thing is, if you look 40 years later at the Biden's whole Build Back Better plan, and the 2 big pieces of it are the, the clean energy and all the jobs we'll create, and the CARES economy and all the jobs we create. And that was exactly what we had in the Berkeley plan. We had a plan for Berkeley to become to grow businesses, jobs, and incomes by becoming a world center of energy conservation and efficiency and alternative energy, which was the term then, alternative fossil fuels, wind and solar and so forth, which actually succeeded over time. And the other part of that plan was focusing on childcare and home health care and all this stuff, and the African American community. So which is, I guess, the other part of the Biden plan today. So the reason I'm mentioning that is that in the 1990s, in the Clinton administration, I helped develop this model called Metropolitan Economic Strategy for how urban regions, everybody could all work together to have a stronger economy and, again, sustainable environment and inclusive equity were 2 key parts of that. And for example, we were the first people to really highlight what Portland, Oregon was doing. As we coined this term, they're getting richer by becoming greener. They were like, right, another term I use, the Silicon Valley of sustainability. And so when global urban development got created, we took this metropolitan economic strategy model around for the whole world. We began to work to help apply it all over the world. So that meant that you grow your economy by becoming more sustainable, not less. And
God, it's like music to my ears.
thank you. Yes.
I just can't.
And
sorry to interrupt, but just
no,
why don't other
do.
people sing this song?
Yeah, anytime, please interrupt. And so GUD, when Nancy and I moved back from Prague to Rehoboth, we felt that it was time to have a big breakthrough in the US around just what I'm talking about. So for about 4 years, we focused on what we called sustainable economic development. We called it climate prosperity. We called it green capitalism. We called it, what we now call it, sustainable innovation and inclusive prosperity. But it was all the same idea. So we worked with Julian Castro, was then the mayor of San Antonio. He did what was called Mission Verde. And we worked with the mayor of San Jose on what was called the Green Vision. And that's how, and one of the staff people on that was Colin O'Mara, who then we recruited to come to Delaware to be the head of DENRAC. And we did a climate prosperity strategy in Silicon Valley. We did in Portland, Oregon, a climate prosperity initiative that led to the creation of eco districts, which is a wonderful initiative in many cities now in US and Canada that grew directly out of our efforts. And in fact, in Delaware, through our involvement with the Blue Water, when Jack Markell got elected governor, we enabled Delaware to become part of this movement and got funding from the Rockefeller Brothers Fund for the Delaware to do, I guess they called it a clean energy economic strategy. particularly then we were working with Colin and with Stephanie McClellan. So for 4 years, we Southwest Florida, and then the last one is in Sarasota County, where we had a big breakthrough because all the county commissioners were Republicans. But after the crash of 2008, and they were trying to figure out how to grow the economy without ruining what a beautiful place it was. So somebody said, oh, global development has sustainable economic development. So they came to us and they got a grant from U.S. Department of Energy. And we even did this big plan for Sarasota County. It was called, I think it was called Prosperity in Paradise. And they unanimously voted to accept it and implement it. Although then the Tea Party thing made everybody crazy and some of it never happened. So in those 4 years, we were doing this work in the US. And then we decided to get back to the world again. And so President Obama had created with all the other heads of state from Canada to Argentina, something called the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas. And we were asked to become part of that, especially what was called the Urban Planning Initiative, which was between US and Brazil, President of Brazil, Lula at that time. And so we helped, we'd been working in Brazil for a decade, especially in Curitiba, which was kind of a famous, somewhat sustainable city led by a very legendary, wonderful architect mayor named Jaime Lerner, who was one of the founders and vice chairs of GOD, and he just passed away a month ago. And Jaime Lerner, among many other things, actually invented bus rapid transit, which is now in many cities all over the world. But they did it first in Curitiba because they didn't have enough money to build a subway. So he figured out, well, we could do it with buses, so what happened was in 2011, we organized in Curitiba a 2-day conference sponsored by US and Brazil governments that was called Planning for Sustainable Economic Development Across the Americas, and where we showcase all this work that was being done in the US. In fact, Stephanie McClellan gave a talk about Delaware. Out of that effort, then we made this decision to see if we can have a big breakthrough somewhere in Brazil, kind of like what I had been involved in California in the 1970s, where ultimately became a much greener place and a place where people understood that being greener, being more sustainable, wasn't bad for the economy, it was good for the economy. It didn't cost you a lot of money, it saved you a lot of money, through conservation efficiency. It didn't destroy jobs, it created a lot of jobs and business opportunities and so forth. So we thought if we could find a place in Brazil that could be like a model for the world, that would be important because at that point in 2011, the models that we had were all in, I guess, what they would call the global north, all in affluent development countries in North America, in Western Northern Europe, and East Asia, and so forth. We said Curitiba was a little city. We thought maybe we could do something bigger. Starting there, that was our original plan. But then this is where the story gets bumpy. Politics intervened because the good people in Curitiba lost the election, so we couldn't do it there. And then we started in Sao Paulo with something called the Compact City under a pretty good mayor then, but then he lost, so that ended. And then we went to Minas Gerais, and we were working with the state government and the Federation of Industries, and then they lost. It was, and finally the federal government in Brasilia asked us to come to Porto Alegre, and because the governor, they had a newly elected governor who was from the same party as the presidential administration, what's called the Workers' Party. Think of it like the Democratic Party, basically. And so they said, we want you to do your whole metropolitan economic strategy, sustainable innovation, inclusive prosperity approach in Porto Alegre. And Nancy and I came, and we really fell in love with the place. It was it had this kind of activist tradition. One of the things that was amazing that we only learned when we got here was that this was the birthplace of the modern environmental movement. The guy who was like kind of the Rachel Carson of Brazil, a man named Jose Lutzenberger, who was the first environment minister. He was from here. In fact, he lived right around the corner from where we live now. And there was the first international chapter of the first environmental activist organization in Brazil called Agapan was started in Porto Alegre in 1971. The following year, the first international chapter in the world of Friends of the Earth was started here in Porto Alegre, Amigos da Terra. And these two amazing women were the leaders of it, Magda Henner and Giselda Castro. And there's a wonderful documentary film called, we'll have to see if you want to show a copy, it's called Substantivo Feminino, about these two amazing women that became world environmental leaders, going to UN conferences and all that. So Porto Alegre had this really cool tradition, that we were inspired by. And the funny thing was it had kind of died out. Like, in other words, the people that were still around, Lutzenberger had passed away, and his daughters run this called the Gaia Foundation. But most of the people that had been involved in this movement were old timers like us, and the whole younger generation didn't know that it ever even existed, And so that was one, we helped connect the two generations. So we thought, well, Porto Alegre is good. It also had this kind of radical tradition. It was the #1 place in Brazil that opposed the dictatorship in the 1960s. That was a good thing. And it had a kind of a progressive city government and so forth. And so we said, okay, we'll do it. And that's how it started. And then Nancy and I, we came here to be consultants on a test project where and we were always pushing the envelope. They had discovered offshore oil in Brazil in around 2007 off Rio de Janeiro. And one of the things that Lula did was he created this industrial policy. So why do we have to buy everything from Europe and Korea and Japan? Let's build it in Brazil. And so they created these kind of nodes. And one of the nodes was in the south of the state of Rio Grande do Sul, the area called Rio Grande. So they were building this offshore drilling equipment. It was kind of very yucky. So, so they said, can you do a strategic plan for them? And we did a plan. We said, use oil to get off of oil. You see, like, in other words, all of the infrastructure investment and transportation investment and workforce development and education and all the capacity building, use all of that, all this money that's going to be flowing in these jobs to make a super green economy. And so that was our argument. And to our utter astonishment, they liked it. They said, oh, that's good. And they adopted it as part of their strategic plan. So, and so Nancy and I kind of looked at each other and we said, wow, this is kind of a cool place. Maybe we should come back. So, so they asked us, we had never really done anything like this before. If we were consultants, we'd go for, a month or something, but they said, could you come for a year? We can get money from the World Bank to do a statewide economic strategy. So that's how we moved here originally in September 2013 as consultants to the state government. And like many things in Brazil, it got delayed. So it ended up being more like 2 years. But what we did was we said to them, we'll only do the plan if you do it the GUD way. And what was that? Is that we said that the economic growth and development strategy would be for Rio Grande do Sul to become the most sustainable and innovative place in Latin America by 2030. And we thought that right then that was going to kill the whole deal. the reason we said Latin, we said Latin America because they didn't feel they could, catch up with, North America and Europe and all that. We said, no, you're not going to catch up. You're going to leapfrog ahead. You're going to, you don't have as much bad stuff done yet. They have a lot of renewable energy already because of hydropower and biomass. We said, you could jump into the future. And that became the name of the plan. We called it the Leapfrog Economic Strategy. And so we said, this is how we want to do it. And they said, okay, fine. And it was kind of amazing because what we discovered in Brazil, people have this very spiritual connection to sustainability. I call it, like the Gaia spirit. Now, they don't act sustainably. So they don't actually do much to like be sustainable, but it's kind of like religion, or, in other words, when you say we should be sustainable, like people like, it's like, I should be a good Catholic or something. Yes, I should be, you know what I mean? And so when we told them, we said, okay, here we are, we're international economic development experts. And here it was 2014, we're working on the plan. We said, if by 2030, you could have a much more dynamic growing economy, because the economy was a little stagnant, and have, better jobs and higher incomes and a more thriving place by being much greener, by being way more sustainable. Would you like to do it that way? And they were like, yeah, that would be really cool. Yeah. And it was funny because they didn't really believe that they could do it or that they would do it, but they for sure liked the idea of it, And so we did the plan. And but the problem was, yet again, and in this case, the governor who we were working for, who was a law professor and he'd been a justice minister and he'd been mayor of the city for 8 years, a very progressive guy, and his whole team. He embraced the plan and he was going to do it after he got reelected, which he wasn't. So there we were again, by the time under our contract, by the time we were to deliver the report, we had a new governor who had just run against the old governor, saying the old governor was terrible. So, and we handed the plan and they were like, they looked at us like, actually, a lot of his people liked the plan. But they said, well, we just said the old governor was terrible. Now we can't turn around in our first few months and say, oh, but he has this really great plan, and we're going to do it. So they said, the new governor, who was a kind of a moderate, pretty decent guy, he had been the mayor of the second largest city in the state. And he said, I have an idea. He said, why don't you do a version of the plan in my city and region where I'm from, not in Porto Alegre, and we'll support that indirectly. It won't be a state initiative, but behind the scenes, we'll give it our full support with the mayor and maybe even give some funding. So that's why we didn't leave. So they said, stay around, we're going to do this thing. And we worked on that for 6 months. In the end, it ran into various complexities, and they didn't get the funding that they needed, because by that point, the economic recession was really hitting hard. So they were like, okay, forget it. But here was the magic, that during the 6 months that we were still here commuting 2 hours by bus to this other city, Caxias do Sul, and we were still living here in Porto Alegre, there was a whole group of young people in their 20s and 30s who were like kind of sustainability activists and sustainability entrepreneurs and wanted to do startup businesses that were sustainable and all this kind of stuff. And they said to us that we want to organize a hub, a startup hub and co-working space and maker space and activity center for sustainability activists, sustainability entrepreneurs, sustainability organizations. Will you, GOD, will you be part of it? And we were like, yeah, sure. So that was called Paralelo Vivo, was the name of the hub. And at the same time, there was this the federal, one of the 8th ranked university in Latin America, which is just across the street from here, the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul. um, where I've been a visiting professor, they have this entrepreneurship challenge, and they asked me to be a mentor. So between this hub and this entrepreneurship challenge, we unleashed this kind of like youth revolution. It was like a whole new generation of people, and they got all excited about the leapfrog strategy and wanting to do it. And we had been working on it for 10 years, this one idea that was a centerpiece of the strategy. We call it sustainable innovation zones. So these are areas in cities, around universities, and with incubators and tech parks that capture the whole idea of this kind of innovation ecosystem, innovation district kind of notion, but apply innovation technology, entrepreneurship, startups, all of that, and apply it to sustainability. So we said innovation and technology for sustainability, entrepreneurship and startups for sustainability, creativity and collaboration for sustainability. So that's the whole purpose of the zone, and it's place-based, and it's a grassroots kind of citizen movement, very inclusive. And so for people to apply new technologies, new ideas, new products, new services, everything to transform their own community, to become the model of the future, then to be scaled up with new technologies, new businesses, and so forth. And so we had recommended in the report, we said the first one would be in Porto Alegre, and the government said no. But then there we were working with all these young people, and they were like, reminded me of when I was 18-year-old radical in the San Francisco Bay Area. They said, well, let's just do it. And so we said, well, we're global urban development. I guess we could do it if we want to. So through this Parallel Vivo, we offered this course, how to organize the Sustainable Innovation Zone. And it got 40 people, and it was just magic. We had we called the Sustainable Innovation Zones based on 6 elements: innovation and technology, entrepreneurship and startups, sustainability and resource efficiency, creativity and collaboration, participatory community management, and business-friendly environment. So we said it has to have all these 6 elements. So we got all these people to do this course, and not just young people, but older people too. We had 2 professors in there. And we organized them according to the 6 elements. We said, okay, your job is to come up with one major action you're going to do in the 6 months after the course. And as each week went by, it got more and more and more energy. The city government did a 3-minute video that went viral. Like the media started writing about it. More and more people started coming. And even crazier things happened. We got recognized by the Swedish government as the top priority for 2016 to help Rio Grande do Sul become the most sustainable and innovative place in Latin America. And on and on. The UN Commission on Science and Technology for Development. So by the time we reached the 8th week of the course, where the students were presenting, the 6 groups were presenting their projects they were going to do, there were like 100 people in the audience. Like everybody had heard about it, like, oh my God, this is something amazing that's happening. And so there, Nancy and I, we were kind of stuck but it was right around the same week that we had the final session of the course, December 15th of 2015, that we got the word that the whole Big Caxias project wasn't going to happen. So we were like, oh my God, we're supposed to go home now. And then we made, and Nancy was the iron hero of this. We made this decision, like, well, let's just stay and do it as an NGO, and we did. And so for one of the things that we did was we brought green drinks to Porto Alegre for the first time ever. And the first night we had it, which was the beginning of a big festival, it was a beautiful Friday night, wonderful weather, and it had this big outdoor patio, Parallel Vivo. We had like over 100 people. So it became this big young people grassroots movement. but that it also brought in the older generation. So we people learned about Jose Litzenberger, that, we brought his daughter to speak to us. And a lot happened. We in working with the Swedish, we picked these 4 goals that by 2025, because we wanted to be ahead of the 2030. Yeah.
It also became a focal point. There were a lot of individual initiatives when we talked about the multi-generationism. There were a lot of separate groups that were just, or organizations that were, one people that were just doing trees and another, and there was something about this energy that it brought everybody together, which was very empowering. So there was the person who did the the organic cloth for babies, and then there was the tree people, and then there was the recycling people. It was so powerful, like the synergy of all of these people working together. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Yeah, in fact, the Parla Vivo became synonymous. Even ZISPOA stands for Zona de Inovação Sustentável de Porto Alegre. Porto Alegre Sustainable Innovation Zone in Portuguese. So ZISPOA is a zone that we drew a boundary around, which, by the way, over the years, we expanded it 5 times. So started with part of 2 neighborhoods, and now it's all or part of 10 neighborhoods. So it's a much bigger zone. And but in the beginning, people couldn't, like, there was Parla Viva, which was this house that was this amazing activity center, and people thought Parla Viva was ZISPOA, and ZISPOA was Parla Viva, even though no, there were 2 different things. One was the hub, and the other was the zone. But we were doing, the other thing was that people were used to protesting, and they were used to doing kind of service activities, but this was something completely different. We were making the future ourselves. I used to tell this a story, back when I was a young activist in San Francisco, there was this radio show that had this radical news. And the guy that would, he had his own version of Walter Cronkite. He would always end the news, he would say, well, that's today's news. And if you don't like it, go out and make some of your own. And so when we started ZISPOA, we said, we're making our own news, and because people said, how are we going to do it? I said, well, we'll tell people we're doing it, and then we'll see what they do, and that's kind of how it went. We asked the Swedish government for an electric Volvo, because we work with a bunch of professor students to have a plan for electric car sharing. And in the end, they didn't give us the Volvo, but in order to get the Volvo, we promised to build our own charging station, the first electric car charging station in all of Porto Alegre, which was built by a bunch of young people, and at a big kind of urban parking lot of an urban shopping center. So the consolation prize was the Swedish ambassador did come with the mayor to inaugurate the charging station, and we borrowed an electric car for the day from somebody we knew. But we built it was a recycling facility that was being unused, and we with the city help, we turned it into this community garden and composting center. And then 2 businesses grew out of that, one for composting residential food waste, another one for commercial food waste, that goes to help grow organic food and help poor people make livelihoods. And it was just, we had festivals and ZIS Talk seminars, and there was all this action. We built the first solar panel in the university. It was called the Solar Post. So when people are standing around, they could charge their phone or their tablet from solar energy. Now we have 2 of them. And all the bike sharing company, an electric bike company, several solar companies, all this sustainable food and sustainable clothing that Nancy mentioned. So all of this was kind of emanating from this movement. And then I'll try to go. After a year and a half, we had this tragedy, which was the Parla Vivo, the house had a flood, the roof flooded and basically destroyed it. And so we had to move out. and we couldn't find another place quickly to keep everybody together. So then they all dispersed. So at that point, the university came to our aid and gave us a facility to work out of at the campus. And so then that was one big change. And after 2 years, we were doing these Sweden, Brazil Innovation Weeks. We had a UN Habitat Urban Thinkers campus with more than 200 people. That was one of the most collaborative things anybody had ever seen. We had like more than 60 organizations participating. And so we finally reached a point where we thought the city council, this was one of the coolest things. And because this was in the middle of impeachment and horrible partisan hatred in Brazil, just like is happening in the US. And in the middle of all that, and we had just seen on the city council, they had some like really obvious sustainability thing that everybody should be for. I don't remember. It was so, it'll come back to me, but I remember they had a vote and it was a total party line vote where all of the progressives voted yes and all of the center right voted no. And here we came along and they, one of the two councilmen, one from the kind of the center right and the other from the center left, they jointly proposed that the city council vote unanimously, the city council vote to officially recognize the SPOA as the boundaries of the zone as something that really existed in the city and deserved public, support. And that passed unanimously. It's like everybody voted for it and nobody against it. So there was some kind of way in which this transcended politics. It was kind of liked for different reasons, I guess, by everyone, the citizen initiative aspect of it. So after 2 years, Nancy and I thought, we've succeeded, now we can go home. And we went back to Rehoboth and she had knee surgery. And so then we were there for 7 months. And after 2 months, we were very flattered. And they said, we want you back. The university wants me to come be a visiting professor. So we said, yes, we'll return. And but it took us 7 months to get back. And we thought when we left, everything was in great shape. When we got back 7 months later, all these hundreds of young people that we had counted on had, moved on. And we couldn't recreate the magic. So then that became the second SPOA, where what we did was we went, instead of to the kids, we went to the adults. And then we organized a movement, a very collaborative, multidisciplinary movement of people that didn't know each other. We were the glue that brought together of professors at the Federal University and the other smaller federal health sciences university across the street, and maybe more middle-aged entrepreneurs and so forth that had more kind of a stable future, and that worked. So that ultimately SPOA continued to move on to have, first of all, a gigantic impact on the university. That I'm very proud to leave that behind. But we created a new sustainable innovation professional interdisciplinary curriculum, a certificate program that's going to be launched next year. There's a big project around kind of greening the campus, and a lot of impact, all the way up to the top leadership, that'll have lasting value. Before COVID, we had done a lot about, there are 4 big goals: be most energy efficient, most solar powered, most bike friendly, and most renewable technology friendly. So we had 3 big focal points: sustainable energy, sustainable mobility, circular economy. And we did a lot of projects. I can go on all of those. And one of the big ones that we had before COVID was doing what we called sustainable parklets, where you take out 3 parking spaces on a kind of a commercial street, and you put in this seating area that's basically a public park. The one we did was built out of eco blocks, recycled concrete made by low-income families. and had the solar post and all of that. And it had bike parking, because one of our big goals had been public bike sharing, a private dockless bike sharing company that we helped create, as well as bike lanes. So we launched the first parklet in December of 2019, and there were going to be 3 more in 2020, and then came COVID, and that whole movement died because people are not hanging out, in huge numbers in public places. But we have now one big project, which is the solar, trying to still have Lisboa be the most solar powered place in Latin America by 2025. And we tried for a year to organize a big co-op, but it turns out the laws and regulations here are against us to do that. But we've now come up with a whole new solution with not just private solar installers on the rooftop of buildings, but a new company that grew directly out of Lisboa that does remote solar, where the solar is on farms, but people can sign up for it. And we think that
That's what we call community solar.
okay.
That I'm assuming that they passed a state law a few years ago, I guess sort of making it legal, and they just passed a law, the state legislature, I think this year, to fix a few aspects of it, but I'm assuming it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah, so between local solar and remote solar, we now think, and tying it in with organizing the local businesses and residents, we actually think that we could actually achieve our goal, it would be the most solar place in Latin America over the next 5 years. So I could go on and on and on, so please forgive me, I probably won't wait too long, but so I'm going to stop there. But so just to say one more thing, which is, what was the impact? The impact on politics and on the establishment was profound. And now under the third governor, they're actually doing at the state level a kind of a version of the leapfrog strategy. They call it Innova RS. And the cool thing is the 2 first people they hired to help do it were young, graduates of the university who had been leaders of Lisboa. And so that's one thing. And the other thing is that it started to have a broader impact. Another city in the state did organize a ZIS, in that case led by the mayor, and it's going well. There's a third one that may get organized in the state. We have one in Panama City, Panama, that was done by a group of young kind of sustainable green building activists. And so we think, especially this university model can really work in many, many cities all over the world. And it's nice because it brings the university together with the community and enables professors to not just be experts, but to be a kind of activist, that they love, and that's part of their work. And so that's kind of where we are. So now we're coming back to Rehoboth and trying to readjust, and things are solid here. We think we can leave this time and it'll continue fine. And not sure, we want to help spread this idea. I'm not sure how to do it next, but we're having a lot of conversations. So let me stop there. Yes, you want to add anything?
No.
Okay.
Well, I have a question,
Sure.
and that is, one of my favorite questions is always follow the money. And I'm just wondering what kind of funding all these projects were self-funded? It was a university funding, government funding, and did anybody end up, forming little businesses? I mean, you talked about it being business friendly, creating a business friendly environment. How did all that work?
Well, the amazing thing is that this was something that was really unpredictable. That when we went to GUD doing Lisboa, GUD, we didn't have any funding to do it other than Nancy and me, giving our time, and other people. And Lisboa didn't have any money. We did get some money here and there to do little, like we got some money from the Swedish government on a number of different occasions for little projects we did with them, but we almost got some money from the US government. We came really close. I think Trump screwed us. That was for a solar energy initiative here. And we had a lot of in-kind support from the university that was vital. And in-kind support from some businesses and professionals. But most of the stuff that was done, some support from the city government, not funding, but in-kind support. But most of the stuff was done on people's own initiative with their own resources, both creating startup businesses and growing them, or projects, like when we built the charging station, it was a couple of startup businesses that they paid
They
to build.
they built that with their own money?
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying? And then charged for the use of
Well,
the charger?
Yeah, well, that was the plan. Although the funny thing is that it's still not operating. So the guy, this was the problem with young people. So the two guys that did it, one of them went to get a PhD in Paris, and the other went to get a PhD in Rio de Janeiro, and they just abandoned. So the thing's sitting there. It's still not. But luckily, there is a company we work with now that has electric vehicle charging stations, and we're trying to get them to buy that one, the Zespoa one, so that they can operate it. It was the most attractively. It was a woman who had a sustainable design firm who designed it, and it's purple and it's a really cute shape. You've never seen another charging station like this one.
We want a picture. We want you to send a picture.
Okay, all right.
Well, we want pictures. Pictures are good.
Yeah, the day we opened it, like I said, was a huge event. There was more than 100 people there, and we had the car, that this professor loaned to us, so it looked legit,
But to Jan's question, did you get startup money from the World Bank, or did that fall through initially?
Well, the World Bank paid a lot or actually was a big loan to the state government for the consulting work that we did.
Uh-huh.
For strategy. Once we did Zespoa, it was tragic. It's so amazing how the people that are in these institutions, like international institutions or foundations, or that are supposed to be so innovative and creative, really aren't. And they never do anything unless somebody else has already done it first, and they know it's completely acceptable and not risky. And so we said to the World Bank, look, you helped fund the plan that this came out of. Why not help? We couldn't get their help. World Resources Institute, their national headquarters in Brazil is not only in Porto Alegre, it's inside the zone. And we could not get any help from them. It was amazing.
Just, I know there's a book out there. I forget the name of it. I haven't read it, but my husband has, and it talks about, you've probably read it or know more than I do about it, but it's, sort of about all the bad things that funding from the World Bank has, brought about in terms of developing like third world countries and giving money to these countries, and, because to then exploit the country and its resources and try to make them look like us as a developed country. But so
yeah,
it's nice to actually see that the World Bank put some money into something like this.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because there were a number of occasions that we're saying, okay, funding is a problem, but it was a blessing that, I don't know how else to say it, but we were pure.
Yes.
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 And no
Thank you,
strings
Nancy.
attached.
It turns out that, this is what's so crazy about how you think that, you would think that not having money would have been a huge liability, a big problem. And actually, I think Nancy's totally right. It was very lucky because we didn't have anybody getting involved or coming to us because they wanted to get money out of it. So the people that were doing it from their heart, and that's, I think, even what made it so beloved.
So I guess I'm still not clear. So when you created this zone and you have those 6 principles or whatever, and then is it something that the government then like adopts in terms of like guiding policy for land use and
Well, it could. I
other
mean,
things?
the thing of it, it's like an open container. It's a flexible model. So every zone would be, would be different in terms of how it's organized, who organized, and what goals it has under this guiding umbrella. That in other words, that whatever it is, it's to become more sustainable. Otherwise it's not a sustainable innovation zone. So for example, like in the one in Santo Angelo, the mayor hired the woman, and it's her full-time job, as a former business professor who's full-time coordinating that zone. So that was a different approach. Now, luckily, the mayor, when he started the zone, he was in his first term and he did get reelected. So, but what happens after he's gone? Because that was the other thing that, by the way, that we learned by accident was by doing the zone outside of government. And it did have the blessing and encouragement of the city government. In fact, one of the leaders of the city government, a guy that was in charge of its most famous program, participatory budgeting, he's on the board of GOD. So he totally thought it was great. Do you know what I mean? And they did help us, but we were completely independent. It was a citizens activity. We wanted all the politicians to support us, and we didn't support any of them. We were neutral, and that really paid off because now we're on our third mayor from when we started, and they all like us, you see. And so doing it directly through government has some advantages. You get much more institutional support and resources, but it has a big disadvantage. I mean, even Rockefeller Foundation, Porto Alegre was one of the first wave of the 100 resilient cities. It was one of the first third of the cities. They did it over 3 years, but Porto Alegre was in the first round. And the Rockefeller model was, we're going to do it through city governments. We're going to work with city governments. And then guess what happened? After all these governments change hands, then the new mayors dropped the whole thing. They weren't able to keep continuity institutionally, you see. And what we have done by using the university, we have created stable continuity regardless of who's mayor and who's governor. And so that turns out that was a really important lesson that we learned by accident, but I think a good lesson. Yeah, please.
I have a question about the people, the students, the young people who were involved in this. A, do you have any guesstimate about how many people were involved? B, did you monitor what they were doing, or they were sort of mostly, doing it on their own, but you were available for consultations? And also, what was the gender mix? And were they students? Were they unemployed and just had a lot of time on their hands, or were they students at university and doing this as projects? I know that there's probably a lot more time than.
No, a lot of great questions. So let me, first of all, I think a majority were women, but it was pretty well balanced. So it was secondly, they were ranging from 18, 36 when we started. Some of them were university students. Most of them were more likely like recent graduates, people that had young professional jobs, or that were working in some kind of nonprofit activism, or who were trying to start a business, and there were a number of businesses that did get started and that we helped grow. Now, the people that were doing the businesses, even though they were a key part of the network, we weren't that involved with that. We did actually create a mentoring. There was a bunch of professors and other business people that did mentoring. And that was one of our big projects, you know. But in terms of the overall coordination, the businesses were kind of more just doing their thing, and we were supporting, encouraging them. Green Drinks, we had a tradition every month. We had 3 businesses give a talk, like a 5 to 7 minute PowerPoint to like help promote their business, you know. And then we also had sustainable local food and beverages, you know, that were from the local businesses to help promote it. You know, we made this joke that normally in Green Drinks, the people are green and not the drinks. But in our Green Drinks, the drinks were green too, because they were all local, organic, alcoholic beverages. So, but at any rate, there were the businesses and there were the projects. So the working groups, we call them, or the projects, and those we were more actively involved in. So all the people that were working on a project or in a working group, we were regularly interacting with them. And that was part of the advantage. They got to learn a lot about organizing skills, you know, strategic thinking, management skills. They got to practice their English, you know. So there were a lot of, you know, they thought, hey, you know, working with Americans was cool. And so there was a lot of a side benefit, I think, from them of doing it. And we're very proud because they, even though after 2 years they kind of went to the 4 Winds, they're still carried forward their experience, you know. So like, for example, one of our favorite Zespoa leaders, he's now getting a master's degree in energy and resources at UC Berkeley, you know, and he's still a, you know, very green activist, you know, and hopefully eventually will return to Porto Alegre. So some people went to other cities or, you know, graduate education and so forth, but they carried this tradition forward. And some people are still involved with various businesses, various organizations. So if you look at like the landscape of Porto Alegre, a big chunk of it on the sustainability side is a kind of Zespoa alumni club, you know. And one of the things that was problematic, though, is that when we began, the economy was still in good shape, but as it got worse, that really made it hard. For example, we had this network of entities, collaborative houses and co-working spaces. And so there was this whole network. They were all part of Zespoa. And one of the biggest ones was the one called NAS Co-working. It was the first, biggest, hippest, and coolest one. And it was an anchor for the zone in the beginning. That doesn't even exist anymore. Because, you know, people had to go get regular jobs with big businesses and they can't be entrepreneurial co-working people anymore. You know what I mean? So that may revive again in the future. But, you know, I don't know, were there any questions I didn't answer? Or?
Oh, no, that's good.
You said about age, it was very intergenerational. It was actually amazing. We spent so much time with younger people that, you know, we haven't done that in like, you know, decades. And we go back to the United States. It's like, oh, okay, where the younger people are over here and the older people are over here, but it was all mixed. It was fantastic. Fantastic.
We had meetings all the time. You know, there was the other cool thing. The apartment that we had, the woman that had owned it was a very famous, she had created the movement for breast cancer screening in Porto Alegre.
Mobile unit.
Yeah, mobile unit. They have this famous annual event to raise money for that. So this woman in the same apartment at the same table where we were sitting had done that years earlier. And we were having meetings all the time in our apartment where we're like, Nancy and I, we were old enough to be, in some cases, to be the grandparents and definitely the parents, you know, we were older than most of these kids' parents. And, but it was just, it was so wonderful. And the other thing that happened was the young people then went back to their professors as well as to their parents and as well as to their bosses, and said, this really cool thing is happening. And that's how the movement grew. The way we got all these professors involved was they heard about ZSPOA from the students. The way we got a lot of respect from the establishment was people hearing about it from the children. I always remember this one meeting. The guy was like the head of the State Development Bank, and they just got some money from France. He wanted to figure, they're supposed to be for doing sustainable stuff, and he wanted my advice about how to invest it and make the loans. And I walked in, the first thing he said is that, he said, my daughter and her boyfriend are involved with ZSPOA. It's like, there you go. That's the magic of it, right? And so over time, the professors got inspired, and what they started to do, this was a game changer. There was originally was one guy, and then it was a woman, and it spread and spread. They would say to their courses in business, in engineering, in economics, in urban planning and architecture, they say, if you want, you could do research on ZSPOA, like to get course credit, as part of the educational curriculum here. And the students, they loved it. It was a lot of fun. They learned a lot. They felt proud that they made a difference. Often they would present these great ideas that never happened, but sometimes they happened, like even the first project, the electric car sharing, that was a student project. The solar post was a student project. In fact, the woman, the student team that did the solar post, the woman then got a job for the solar company. And when we did the parklet, she was the project manager for the solar post for the parklet. And so there was a lot of, so the professors then got inspired and they got engaged. And ultimately, that's what saved us, because they're still engaged, even though the students are long gone.
Thank you. That's exciting. That's so exciting.
I do want to learn more about the solar post.
Yeah,
See
you, and,
see a
and
picture of
let
it.
me,
Is
and
it on
here's
the
cool-
website?
You can see a picture of it. And here's the cool thing is that originally the students had this idea. This guy is a wonderful man. He's one of the leaders of ZSPOA, is the top sustainable business expert in Brazil, or one of them. He's a management professor, and he teaches this incredible course called Social and Environmental Management, both at undergraduate and the graduate level. And
Felipe?
yeah, his name is Luis Felipe Nascimento. And he's now one of the ongoing leaders of ZSPOA. But he, in his class, Social Environmental Management, they had groups competing for who could do the coolest project, right? And one group, they were trying to raise money. The management school is a kind of a relatively small building, and they wanted to raise money to put solar panels on the roof of the building because the university wouldn't pay for it. They said, well, maybe we can raise privately and put solar panels on. And I guess the dean agreed if they could raise the money, he could do it. And of course, they didn't come anywhere near raising that kind of money. So they raised a modest amount of money. So they came to me and Luis Felipe, they said, well, we failed. We said, no, you didn't. You raised this much money. So the question is, instead of giving up, it's not enough to put solar panels on the roof, but maybe it's good enough to do something. So we went to this solar startup that was affiliated with ZSPOA, and they said, this is how much they raised. What could you do for this amount of money? And this was a true innovation. They invented the solar post. They said, well, here's what we could do. We could take a tall metal pole, and where did I go? A tall metal pole, and on the top of the pole is one solar panel and a battery. And then at eye level, there are 4 USB ports. And that's it.
Is anybody doing that in the US?
I had never heard of it. It may still be original. So we did the solar post in the courtyard of the management school. And then now we have this parklet that has a solar post. So you're sitting there drinking your coffee, and you can plug your phone in, and it's being charged by solar energy.
I love it. And because I try to I mean, DART isn't a county thing, but I try to, Concord Pike is in my district, and I've often thought, why don't, and I don't know if, I assume that they exist out there, but I don't really know a lot about bus stops, but
Well, it could be easier though.
and to
to have-
put
to
something
have a
like that
USB
at every
port in
bus stop. So while you're
Yeah.
standing there waiting for the bus, you can charge your phone. Like, doesn't that make sense? Or some of them are even electrified. They could have an electric thing, but I think, I
And
don't know
it's
if
very
it's been,
cheap.
yeah,
That's
and-
the cool
Yeah,
thing. It's like,
They
it's
have
so,
them,
it's
but
so
then
cheap to do.
Some
Yeah.
airports have them, but why not hook them up to the solar charger? rather than-
anywhere that people are sort of standing around, right? Like in a public space.
And the beautiful
Makes-
thing is you can see the most prominent thing is the solar panel. Like, for example, in the parklet, as you're like, because it's in our neighborhood, if you're walking down the street, even a block away, you can see the solar panel at the top of the pole, right? So if you have these all over the place, that would really, and then and then it's not just, oh, I can charge my phone. It's like, I'm charging my phone with solar energy.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'd really like to see pictures of a lot of, not just the solar posts, but
Yeah.
a lot
That's
of
the other thing.
the projects.
Well, if you go right now,
The
even if you
parklet
go-
too.
If you go to
I'd-
globalurban.net and then you click on Porto Alegre, and then you'll see we've got these different articles, and each one has like one picture kind of introducing it. And one of the pictures is of us standing at the solar post. And one of the other pictures is of the parklet, although there you can't see the solar post. But if you look, one of the pictures is when we inaugurated the solar post in the courtyard of the management school. Yeah. And it has this is another silly thing. So the students named the solar post in honor of Luis Felipe Nascimento, which was beautiful. He deserves it. But the funny thing was that when he created this competition for the best student project to get an award, he named the award after me. So there's this little teeny sign in Portuguese that says these three students won the Mark Weiss Award.
Also deserved.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Is the name of the post of Felipe
There's the Luis Felipe Nascimento Solar
post?
And they're very big on, in I don't know if I think it's Brazil in general, but definitely Porto Alegre. Every street is named after someone. Like everything is, somebody's name. You know what I mean? So that's a very big part of the culture here. There's no Sycamore streets. It's all names of people.
Right.
Like we
Mostly
live on-
men or any women?
I would say 98% men.
Men. right?
There's
So-
there's one famous street that's named after a woman, but not too many.
Yeah, that needs to change.
Yes, exactly. Oh yeah, and we are lucky because we live right around the corner is Santa Teresina, so that's named after a woman. Now it's a Catholic saint, but still.
So I have a question, or comment, but I'm sure you'd have a reaction to it. One thing that has driven me nuts for years
Yeah.
is that like I'll often hear like on NPR, like on Friday when they report the business statistics or whatever for the previous month, and they report the GDP, and they always quote like how GDP, I am not an economy major or anything even remotely close to it, but but they talk about how they always emphasize new housing starts or new construction in GDP. And it drives me crazy because of being a preservationist, I don't think that's right. And I did do a little investigating about this years ago, and it's just not my area of expertise by any means, but I have heard that lately there are some, I mean, it may not be a brand new thing, but I heard recently about someone that has or a group that has like an alternative way of measuring the GDP. And I'm sure that's not new, but like, how do we get,
Well, there's a couple
how do we
different,
get that instituted so that we stop looking at new construction to be the thing?
right. Well, there's a couple. Yeah. There's been
At least
a couple
new
different
construction
attempts.
in greenfields.
Right. There's Hazel Henderson, who's been a sustainability activist going all the way back to the 70s. And she has her organization called Ethical Markets Media. She's been involved in these efforts for a very, very, very long time. And in fact, we did a project, she used to be on the board of GUD, and we did a project together that she still has called the Green Transition Scoreboard. And what that does is it measures since 2007 how the total amount of resources, that are going into renewable energy and all this stuff, including from the private sector for profit. And it's amazing. The first one in 2009, we did it for Copenhagen. Originally it was called the Global Climate Prosperity Scoreboard, then we changed the name. But anyway, it was 1 trillion. Now it's already way past 10 trillion. So there is change happening. I mean, it's still not enough and too slow. But anyway, so that's a different project that GOD did with Hazel. But she's very big on this alternative GDP kind of measurement. There was an effort in Bhutan once upon a time where they came up with a new index called Gross National Happiness.
Right.
And
They mentioned that in the Baggett film.
And the most famous one, which was the most mainstream, was there was this big commission that one of the people on it was Joseph Stiglitz, who's an economics professor at Columbia University and a very good guy. All the stuff he writes is wonderful. And he was also at one point head of Council of Economic Advisors under Clinton, and he was chief economist of the World Bank. But he's gotten much more radical since
And got the
then.
Nobel Prize, I believe, too.
Yes, for very technical stuff, like very technical stuff. He's a very brilliant guy. When I was in Clinton administration, I got to know him, and he's a nice, comes from this working class background in Gary, Indiana, and is a very nice, solid New Deal kind of a guy. But anyway, Joe Stiglitz was a member of a commission, very high-level international commission with a lot of bigwig experts that did try and come up with an alternative measurement to the GDP, which is so needed because if people die and get sick, the GDP goes up. If you pollute and ruin the environment, the GDP goes up. So the whole thing is crazy. It's not a measurement of how prosperity and quality of life should be measured, including, we need to get to a circular economy where we're conserving and reusing everything and not always trying to make more new stuff and then throw it away.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. That's what we're working on. But
right. So
I mean,
we need to get to a whole different
Yeah.
model. When we started, we had Ludwig Mies van der Rohe was the
Architect.
modernist architect who came up with this saying, less is more. So when we started Climate Prosperity, we tried to do a phrase, we call it less is the new more. Like make it cool. So we have one of the things that's such a challenge. I know this was true of like the carbon pricing idea is that, it's like a chicken and egg thing. We need to change the system, but you can't change the system in order to change it. So you have to somehow figure out how to change it with the way that it is now, which is tough because everything's backwards. How could coal be cheap and solar be expensive? Or, you know what I mean? It's like completely backwards, but that's because
are incremental steps better than like us? Even though we need huge steps, are incremental steps the way to get there or the only thing you can do to get there? It's frustrating.
And our time horizons too, without looking, just beyond the next quarterly earnings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not to go to a 10-year plan necessarily, but God forbid.
Exactly.
So we have this pricing system that's all screwed up and it's totally unfair because it doesn't count the real cost, right? I remember when we were arguing on offshore wind, we said, we had to show that over time it would be cheaper than coal-fired electricity. But one of the arguments I remember we made was that Delaware was spending $750 million a year on people having cancer that they would get from breathing the air from the coal. So if you weren't burning the coal, then you would save $750 million. So that should be part of the real cost of the coal, real price of the coal, even though it isn't. So
Right,
this
so
is
you have
one
to
of
go-
the, sorry.
You have to go to full cost accounting, not just the monetary cost, but the environmental cost, the health cost, and what, everything else.
Exactly what they call the ecosystem services. I used to have this one analogy. I would say that, we're doing only operating costs. So it'd be like, think of it this way. This is what climate change shows. What if you had a house and for 30 years, all you were doing was paying the utility bills? And then all of a sudden, one day you open the garage and you had 30 years of mortgage and insurance payments that you didn't pay. You see what I mean? That's kind of how we operate our economy, right? We're not dealing with the real costs of the impact we're having and how to preserve the future. And Dee, as you said, we have to figure out how to get people to do the right thing without being able to change it the right way, and so this is where we emphasize this economic model, replacing economic fear with economic hope. That, we have this, we call it the 4 greens. Starts with green savings. This is what California proved starting in the 1970s. I was privileged to be part of this by having stricter energy efficiency standards on all new buildings, on all new electric appliances like refrigerators, on all new motor vehicles. Over several, over like 3-4 decades, it saved people more than $100 billion. $100 billion they saved, and they didn't even know the difference. They still had, heating and cooling of buildings, and they were driving cars, and they had all the electronics, but they just were using a lot less electricity to run it, and less energy to run it. And that savings created a stronger economy. It made possible the aggressive efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And the most important thing of all, in California, it became a mainstream, in the 1970s, when I started, it was a totally radical, crazy idea that the economy would be better if it were greener. But 4 decades later in California, it's not a mainstream idea. The business community, the establishment, like, if you said to them, oh, let's get rid of all these regulations and, start polluting more and, ruining the environment more and, spewing more greenhouse gases in the air more, people would say, no, that's crazy. It's what we have a better, stronger economy doing it the way we're doing it, So it's not nearly doing enough far enough. So I'm not saying California is any model of perfection, but the first battle, I got to live long enough to see it won in California, where people believe the economy is better off if it's more sustainable. And this is what we have to do step by step everywhere in the world. Sorry, I think Nancy's saying I got too preachy. I'm sorry.
No, it's like, and another example that I deal with regarding open space preservation here in the county, and actually my predecessor and some other nameless elected officials don't seem to understand that, it's been proven through many studies that open space preservation actually is the cheapest, a preserved parcel is the cheapest form of land use. So, and the only thing that comes even close or is equal is an age-restricted community, because older folks aren't going to school, they aren't driving as much, they aren't, putting as much demand on the government services. But a park is the lowest cost of government services. But yet, like my predecessor and others would say, the public wants more parks. And I've even had some situations where I had a 45-acre parcel that was going to be donated, and I tried to get it to be a county park, and all they see is that the county public works department is doesn't have a big enough budget to maintain all the parks that we already have. So therefore they don't want any new parks, and they don't want to preserve any more parcels. And I'm like, that's such a short-term outlook. Like you need to look beyond your next election and look 20, 30, 40, whatever years from now, even plus just the public loves parks. Like it's not a stupid political move to preserve more parks.
And it must
And
create a few jobs in there to maintain.
yes, in their maintenance,
Which would come
absolutely.
back
Yep,
county.
exactly.
And not only that, if you have parks, property values go up all around.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, there's a whole
Pays
host
for
of
itself.
reasons, but it's just such a, you're like banging your head against the wall to convince them of this. And I don't know. I keep
Every
trying.
battle, you know, every, in my lifetime in public policy, every battle, you know, whether it's smart growth or whether it's walkability, historic preservation of buildings, anything you name, we always have to show somehow that it was better economic.
Yeah. Well, that's what these
Yeah.
studies do, the cost of
Exactly.
services studies. So I guess I just I don't know. Don't worry. I'm not giving up, but it's just frustrating. So.
But that's how you, let's put it this way, that's how you divide the opposition and you neutralize them. And, you know, in other words, you don't necessarily win them over. But
You need to speak their language.
Right. If you can really clearly demonstrate that this saves money and it generates value, then it's harder. Some wing of the business community are going to say, oh, that's okay. So, you know, so then instead of them being united against you, they're divided against you. That's how you win.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's good. So what else? I don't want to keep you too long down there
This
in
was so
Brazil.
much fun.
Yeah.
It was
I'm
fun
so-
to share. Thank you.
I wish
so
you
much.
had 100 people here that listened to what you had to say. It was fascinating. So we'll have to have you back like in January when we
That
have a
would
bigger
be-
audience.
That would be good. And I don't know if there's any, you know,
We'll probably be dressed the same.
Yeah, we're talking to various places about trying to see if we can get sustainable innovation zones going in the U.S. I don't know what, I mean, I guess the obvious thing would be to connect it with University of Delaware, you know, both in Newark and Lewis. But,
Yeah.
so
yeah.
if there's if after this spiel that we gave, if you're interested in helping us, we could for sure use it because we don't feel, you know, we don't feel very well connected at all in Delaware anymore. We've been
Yeah,
gone so long.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I need to go on your website and learn more, and I'll be in touch for sure.
Thank you.
And Jan or Marianne, any other questions or
I think
comments?
Marianne has one.
Thank you. This has been very enlightening. Oh, I'm sorry, Marianne.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I just wanted to say I have three kids, all of whom are probably like a lot of people their age, really worried about climate change and the lack of action on sustainability and so on. They all live in Boulder, Colorado, and one of them has lived in Portland, Oregon. And I was in, so just to say that they're doing as much as they can. I mean, they're in communities that support what you're talking about, but they're all really pretty worried, you know, for people who are only 30 years old. Like if you're looking at a prospect of a future that looks pretty bleak. But I will pass on this recording to them. And they're at a stage in their careers where they're all PhDs, where they might do something with it. They're connected to universities. They're in tech. None of them are in economics, but they're situated in a place where there's welcome ears for this message. But I did want to just say that the first time my oldest son went to college in Portland, Oregon.
Mhm.
When we got there, we're walking around the parent orientation week, and I'm like, I want to live here. I've never seen any place like this ever. And we came to a place where there was a sign up that they had replaced a parking lot with a park. And I was like, did you see the sign? Did you see that sign? Like, can you believe they did that? Like, so you have just knocked my socks off. Both of you, what you've done, the fact that you know Portuguese.
A little.
Mais ou menos.
And one further thing, like I went to a climate change like action at the University of Delaware. It was on campus. It was a climate action day. And most of the attendees were our age. And I was looking around like, wow, like all these kids, and I love kids, but what I observed was a lot of people who were in the original, like Rachel Carson days, that kind of people were all in there with their signs and everything. And the kids were going off and looking at their cell phones and leaving for the weekend. And I thought, wow, like that's disappointing that we can't mesh the two groups, and you've done that too. So I'm just
Yeah, we need that magic sauce, whatever that magic
Yeah.
sauce is.
Yeah.
Well, this is where, let me just share one thing, because I'm a mentor. There's this group called Terra.do, and also a mentor for another group called Techstars on their climate and sustainability. And this is what I'm finding. A lot of the young people are sort of serious professionals, like well-educated in technical fields, maybe in science and engineering, or an entrepreneurial oriented. And they have this movement, but you have to be under 40, I think, even to know about it, called climate tech. And they might possibly occasionally show up at a demonstration or something, but they're not. So this is different from activists, that are protesting against a Keystone Pipeline or something, or fighting for environmental justice in poor communities. But this is a very large group of people, just like your children that you're talking about, that are completely freaked out about the future. They want to do something serious with all their talent and ability, and they kind of don't know what to do.
Yeah.
But we need to tap them, and that's one of the things. Is Sustainable Innovation Zone.
Is that sorry, Mark, is that like a global organization or?
Yes. Well, Terra.do, yeah, they're from all over the world. In fact, a lot of them are from India. And because one of the professors one of the leaders is a Indian guy from Silicon Valley, and also a professor from Berkeley. And Techstars is also international. So this is interesting that this is why we decided to go with this notion, instead of sustainability, sustainable innovation. Because you have this younger generation that's, that they grew up on smartphones and everything, and they have this whole kind of different view of the world, that they have the technical ability to change it, the technical know-how to find the solutions, but they're in despair over, they don't know, like socially, politically, how to organize it and get it done. And that's, to me, the biggest beauty of the Sustainable Innovation Zones, is that it's about doing something now, taking action now to change the future. Even if it's a solar post for like, let's see, at the time it was like, it cost $400 in US dollars, but it's an incredible symbol. We're changing things, now to make the future better. And so that's one of the things I like about it,
That's awesome.
It's great.
All right. Well, I don't know if you guys, you probably, Jan and Marianne, you probably don't have Mark and Nancy's email address, but if you don't mind, I'll put it in the
Sure.
chat, or.
Please share it. Yes, yes. And Jan, I think you had some closing remarks or something, so let's go.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Oh, it's a pleasure. This was, the funny thing is that if it would have been like, so we'll have to do another one, but I'm actually, Nancy and I were both very happy. We said, I think it's going to be a small group, and that's going to be a lot more fun. It's a much more relaxing conversation. So
Well,
thank you.
This was fabulous. It's a good intro. So now next time we can get into more meat and more details, maybe.
Yeah, and
And if you don't see pictures, you've mentioned different things that you'd like to see, drop us a line. because we have hundreds of
Yeah.
pictures. And so
Mhm.
I can provide to you whatever you're looking for if you if you can't locate it exactly on the website.
But even if you go to that Porto Alegre section, there's a PowerPoint that's got tons of slides. So there's these various articles that we wrote for the UN. There's a webinar video of 2 hours with some of the professors that leads this. There's this famous 3-minute video that with all the young people that kind of launched the magic of it. So a lot of that stuff is there. And so I think you'll get some pretty good images, you know.
But one suggestion I have for you, and hopefully I'm not telling you something you don't already know, but you mentioned Colin O'Mara. You know, he still has a foot in the door in Delaware, although now he's head of the National Wildlife Federation.
Okay.
But so he still commutes back and forth. I think he still basically lives in Wilmington and commutes to
Oh.
DC. So he's still very involved politically. I mean, he was very involved in Biden's campaign, but he's still, you know, hasn't left Delaware, even though, you know, he could have, and, you know, with his new job and whatnot. And he's a young, I still consider him a young whippersnapper.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Yeah,
very
me
much.
too.
So it might, when you get back and settled, you might want to touch base with him and just kick ideas around with him. I'm sure he'd have some great suggestions about how to, like, you know, what you might do back
That
here
is such a
stateside.
That's such a wonderful idea. I assumed that he had moved to Washington because
Yeah.
so it's good to know.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
if you
he-
need, I have his cell number. If you need it, let me know.
Fantastic. Yeah, he was in on the kind of the ground floor of all this, and
Yeah.
and then I can still remember there's a guy who's the leader of GOD named Phil Singerman, and he
don't know
was
him, but-
he was the head of the Economic Development Administration under Clinton. He was the head of the Manufacturing Initiative under Obama at the Commerce Department at NIST. He was the head of the Maryland Technology Development Corporation. Anyway, so he was part of this climate prosperity movement. And so when Jack Markell became governor, he liked this idea of having a DNREC person have this economic perspective. So he offered it to Phil Singerman. Phil Singerman said no. So then I guess through Stephanie, I guess she was the intermediary. She said, well, you know, Jack really wants to do this. Do you know of anybody else? And so we started, you know, contacting people, and there was nobody who wanted to do it. And then there was Colin, who was like, you know, he was like 30 years old, but he was super smart, and he had done this, you know, worked on the San Jose Green Vision and all that. And he wanted to do it. So we thought, okay. So we recommended Colin, and they hired him, and it worked out great for everybody, you know.
It was good for us because he worked on in San Jose the plastic bag legislation that they had. So when we were starting to work on the plastic bag legislation for Delaware, he got it. Like, he's like, yeah, I like drafted it for LA County or something like that. And so he was totally on board as DNREC secretary, and we didn't get it passed right away for other reasons, but it was nice having a DNREC secretary that actually was on our side, which isn't always the case, unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh, so when we get back, we'll yeah. And
If you need his number, let me know. I think
Yes.
he'd be a good one to kick things around with.
Yeah, he's a rising star for sure.
Yeah.
And as his wife isn't she a lawyer or?
Well, he got remarried. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we knew that. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And actually, his new wife, was she like ran for office?
She
in
ran,
Maryland, right?
governor, I think, or
Yes, she
I
ran
think in Maryland.
in the Democratic primary. She didn't do that well, but she ran
Yeah.
for governor. Yeah.
Yeah.
We never met her. We know that's why I was thinking. I remember.
They have a little baby. Well, it's actually, I don't know, maybe 2 years old now, maybe almost quite 2 years. I don't know, but still pretty young.
And they live in Wilmington?
I I don't know the whole story, but I think maybe his first wife still lives in Wilmington, so maybe he still lives in Wilmington because his kids from that marriage are here, or child or
Oh.
2 children, I forget. But so I don't know. I don't totally understand the
Yeah, because
the dynamic, but
his new wife ran in Maryland, so.
yeah. So
Anyway,
maybe he has 2 houses,
Yeah.
and kind of comes back and forth. I honestly don't know, but I know he is in Delaware quite a bit.
I would
So-
love to see him. He's a really good guy. It's been
Yeah.
it's probably the last time I saw him was.
Some people thought he was going to run for office here in Delaware, and that's why he keeps a foothold here. But I don't know
Well,
if that's true. or not.
the funny thing is when I first met him, he's from Syracuse. And originally he wanted to be a politician, big time. And he wanted to run in New York. That was his original plan. So when we met him and he was out in San Jose, he was just getting experience.
Mhm.
And then when he came to Delaware, I think initially he would have been very interested. But the problem with Delaware is that it's such a small place and there's like this hierarchy, and there was Bo Biden. And so, Colin would have had to wait 30 years to get in line. So I think he decided to, go with the Wildlife Federation. But who knows, maybe, if he lives long enough, he can run in Delaware.
He's still young.
Yeah.
No. All right. Well, anyway, I don't want to keep you all too late. We could
Alright,
probably talk
okay.
for hours, but we'll have to do round 2 sometime in the future.
That
Round
would be
two.
wonderful. All right, so
Wonderful.
have a great evening, and hopefully we'll, like I said, we'll be back in Delaware in 2 weeks, and hopefully we'll get a chance to see you.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Safe,
everybody.
safe travels back, and we'll
And
see you when you get
consider
back.
us, now regular Green Drink members.
That's all. That'd be great. Yeah. So we'll see you maybe next month.
Okay.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Okay.
Good
Thank you.
night.
All right. Good night.